In this lesson, we're going to be applying a lens flare with null light factory. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is basically creating a lens flare that is made by a plugin called Null Light Factory. So if you have purchased this external plugin and installed it, you'll be able to follow along with this lesson. If you don't have Null Light Factory, you can be watching this course or this lesson just to see what it involves and see if it's something maybe you want to get for After Effects, or you can move on to the next lesson, which is creating heat distortion with the liquefy effect. So let's move on to creating our Null Light Factory lens flare. I'm going to go ahead and create an adjustment layer. Anytime you're creating a lens flare, you want to apply it to an adjustment layer. So we'll come up here to Layer, go to New, and we'll choose Adjustment Layer. And then this is going to be just placed on top of everything else, and I want to right click it and rename it to be something that is a little more recognizable to us, like lens flare, since that's what we're going to add to it. And then to create the lens flare, you can right click the layer and go to Effect, and then come down here to Null. And you're actually going to choose Null Light Factory, which is right there, and then choose Light Factory from that option. And you see that a lens flare was added for us. Now this is just the default, and if you have used Light Factory in the past before Creative Cloud, your default lens flare is going to look different than this. Creative Cloud had a release for Null Light Factory where they updated it, and now it is way, way better, way more powerful, and has a lot more presets that are way more fun to use. Totally overhauled interface since CC came out. So let's go ahead and pick one. So if you want to, you can just come up here to Options, and that is going to open up the Lens Flare Designer. And there are so many choices here. I mean, a lot of different things to do. So I have found that for this shot, the look that I like the best is this Vortex Bright. Now you can choose whatever you want, but I'm going to choose this one. Now once you've gotten a lens flare preset chosen, that just kind of is a fly out menu here on the left, you can actually see what it looks like on your shot before you exit the lens flare designer. So if you say, I don't like that one, you can come back over here and choose a different one. You also can select the different elements here from the lens flare editor and either take them out or hide them if you want to see what it looks like maybe with or without one of them, and edit the presets to fit what you think will look best, or you can completely build one on your own. Now I'm going to add a couple of things to this preset from just where we're at right now. So I like everything that it has so far, but I want it to have a few more things. So one of the first things I want to add is this lens texture. And to add this, I'll just left click and drag this up to the top of all of those parts. Now lens texture is going to show up with a very, very tiny brightness level. So see, that's at 0.40. So I'm going to turn this up just by hovering over the number and left dragging, and you'll be able to see that that texture is now showing up. So this gives it the look that there's little kind of pieces of dirt or something on the lens, and as the flare moves around, you can see that those pieces are revealed. So wherever the light source is coming from, they're going to be the most visible, and as that flare falls off, they're less visible. So that's pretty cool the way that works. Now you don't have to choose this bokeh texture. You can drop this down and choose dirt or grime or dried water. I mean, there are tons and tons of different choices for you to have. So I actually really like that bokeh that we had in the beginning. I think that that's a good one to choose. It almost looks like there's maybe little dust particles or something between us and this lens. Now there's one other thing that I want to add to this just to make it a little bit more interesting looking. So I'm going to kind of scrub down through here, and I'm going to use this digital artifacts. So I'm going to drop that on top, and you can see it just kind of adds a few more little parts to that lens flare. So once you're happy with the way your lens flare is looking, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And if you find that something is too bright, like maybe that texture you think is too bright, you can go back in here and grab the lens texture, and let's turn it down a bit. It's maybe a little bit bright. Maybe just take it down to somewhere maybe more in that range, about 1.87. Let's see how that looks. And I think that's a little bit better overall, but if you want to edit it further, you certainly can do that. It just totally depends on what look you're going for. So you can kind of see how this looks as I move it around. I think I might want to turn that down just a little bit more by grabbing that lens texture and taking the brightness down just a little bit further. And if that pops out, you can just take it back in there. Maybe just have this somewhere closer to 1. Okay? Okay, so you can see that took the brightness down a little bit more, and I think that looks better overall. Okay, so now that I've edited this and I'm happy with the way that it's looking, now I need to get it to follow along with that tracking data that we got in our tracking lesson for the lens flare. So to do this, there's a pretty easy way that we can do it. What I'm going to do is create a light. So we'll come up here to Layer, go to New, Light, and say OK. And that light isn't really going to affect any of my layers because I don't have them turned on to accept them, to accept lights. But really the only thing I need to do is come in here and match up the light in its position with the corner, the left corner of that null object. So just like that, just get it into position. Doesn't really matter what frame you're on, you just want it to be in place. And I'm just grabbing those left handles because a light is always going to be a 3D object. Even if you don't have any other 3D objects in your shot, this X handle is going to move it from left to right. Z would move it backwards in space, and Y would move it up and down. Okay, so now that we have that in position, what I want to do is parent the light just like I would normally to the gun flare track. So now I've parented that, and the light without the lens flare so far is going to move along with that null object. Okay, now if you don't want to parent it, if you find that that's not working for you in the way that you want it to, for instance, your light might be defaulting in position to have some weird Z value, you can just come in here and zero that Z value out. Now it may change the position of your light, and you may need to move it back into position, and it may just cause issues for you to try to get it into position. So another way that you can do this besides parenting, we'll want to turn that parenting off, is to just come in, grab your gun flare track, hit the U key to bring up all its keyframes, or you can go through the motions and hit the P key for position, or go all the way through the transform menu. Get your current time indicator to the first frame of your track, select the position on the gun flare track, and then hit Control C. Then come up here to your light, grab the position, and hit Control V. And what that's going to do is actually take the values and apply them. So when you're parenting, if the light isn't in the exact place as the gun flare track, there will be that offset. But if you directly attribute the data to the light, then it's going to be in the exact correct position. So a couple of ways you can do it. The first way is a little bit more difficult because having an offset between a regular 2D object and an object that's inherently 3D, like a light, is a little bit more difficult. Again, the light was 3D because it had those handles on it. Okay, so now our light is in position and is moving along with our null, but our lens flare still is not really moving along with that. It's just kind of staying in one place. So to get the lens flare to move with it, what we need to do is go into our lens flare and tell it to use lights. So again, you know, I can move the light source location wherever I want it to be, and then if I check on use lights, it's going to snap into the position of that light. And it doesn't really matter where the light is pointing, it's just going to matter where that light source is originating from, which is right there, and the light factory plugin will do all the rest. So all you have to do is check that on, make sure your light is in the position of your track, and then you can click through and see your lens flare moving along with your gun. So this is starting to look really nice. I really love the way that this lens flare looks, and there are so many possibilities with Light Factory to get it to look good in your shot. And I would definitely recommend going into your options and playing around with it, maybe changing it up a little bit. The one last thing that we have to do is remember that our data starts on frame 19. You can look at your light and hit the U key to see that's where those keyframes start. So we don't want our lens flare to be visible before that because it's not following along with anything. So we can key the brightness, or we could just key the opacity of the lens flare adjustment layer. So that's probably the easiest thing to do. So I would just select the lens flare layer, hit the T key, we'll turn it down to 0 on frame 19, hit our stopwatch to set a keyframe, and then we'll move forward to about right here, frame 28, and we'll turn the opacity back up to 100. So that way our opacity is keyed on and our light will appear to get brighter over time and won't show up when it doesn't make sense because there's no gun showing at that point. So really, really cool the way that that kind of pops on to our shot. Great. Okay, so now that that is set up, let's move on to our next lesson, which is going to be really interesting and fun. We're going to be using another adjustment layer, but this time we're going to be using it to create heat distortion, which is a very natural thing that happens whenever you have this much fire in a shot, especially a hot explosion like this. It's going to cause a lot of heat distortion. So I'm going to show you how to do that and kind of what that looks like in the next lesson.